Tonight on Bridge City News, UCP leader Jason Kenney was in Lethbridge today, saying his first order of business if elected premier is repealing the carbon tax. Spring has sprung, which also means it's pothole season. BCN's Loris Alexander talks about how much damage potholes can have on your vehicle. And a major motion picture starring Kevin Costner will be filmed in Fort Macleod. Video journalist Ainsley O'Reilly will explain how you can be in the movie. Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. UCP leader Jason Kenney was in Lethbridge today. He visited with employees at Lethbridge Ironworks with a message that if he's elected premier on April 16th, his first order of business will be to repeal the carbon tax.
The UCP has obtained intervenor status in the appeal courts of Saskatchewan and Ontario to support those provincial governments in defending their taxpayers from a federal carbon tax. So let me just pause to say, you've got the NDP here in cahoots with their ally Justin Trudeau to punish Albertans for heating their homes and driving to work. And you've got the United Conservatives linked up with the governments of Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, and New Brunswick to fight the federal carbon tax. Premier Notley sold us down the river to her ally Justin Trudeau, but United Conservatives will stand up for Alberta taxpayers. That's why I am proud to announce today that if elected, a United Conservative government will scrap the NDP carbon tax. If we are elected, the very first bill introduced in the next legislature will be the Carbon Tax Repeal Act.
Alberta Premier Rachel Notley began her second day of the campaign trail in Edmonton with an announcement that if she is re-elected, the NDP would double incentives for petrochemical and upgrading projects from $3.6 billion to $7 billion over the next 10 years. Notley says her government will continue to stand for the energy sector, seniors and students. She also touts her party's record over the past 4 years, supporting major infrastructure projects, including the construction of hospitals and schools. Reports are Premier Rachel Notley's on her way to Lethbridge to support her local candidates right here. A UCP candidate who says her comments were taken out of context has decided not to run in the upcoming provincial election. Kaylin Ford, who is running in the Calgary Mountain View riding, says her comments that were published by the Press Progress website do not represent her views. The outlet published quotes attributed to Ford, which said, while Muslims in general are never blamed in mainstream for Islamist terrorism, conservatives are often tainted with a brush of white supremacy. Ford says the comments were just fragments of a conversation that was held years ago and were selected to maximize damage to her political career. A Raymond High School teacher is on trial for having inappropriate contact with a grade 11 female student. The courts heard yesterday that Gentry Jack Salmon repeatedly kissed the student's cheek and neck during cuddling sessions in the back of his pickup truck. The student cannot be identified since she was a minor when the two events took place in 2016. The teacher and student communicated several times through text messages and Snapchat. They also talked by phone, but stopped when her sports teammates and parents grew suspicious. The teen was afraid the relationship would be discovered. The trial is expected to run for 2 weeks, during which 8 witnesses are expected to testify. RCMP and Coaldale have laid charges in connection with a serious vehicle accident which occurred on November 12th. A black Chevy truck traveling from Raymond on Highway 845 failed to safely proceed through an intersection at Highway 4, resulting in a nasty collision with a white truck. The occupants of the white truck were first taken to Chinook Hospital, and later a man was transported with more serious injuries to Calgary. The driver of the black truck, 27-year-old Logan Drake of Lethbridge, has been charged with a number of offenses, including dangerous driving causing bodily harm. He will appear in Lethbridge Provincial Court on April 2nd. They put the bumps in bumpers and can really damage your suspension. Now, as the winter season winds down, drivers are welcoming the new pothole season. But how bad will it be this year? BCN's Loris Alexander has the details.
The problem with potholes for your car is that when you hit one with a tire, that jars a lot of things. Stuff in your car is meant to move and adapt to the road, but hard jarring can wear parts out prematurely or break things prematurely. Suspension and steering are related for sure, usually on the front end of your car. Your front end of your car is usually heavier, that's where your engine transmission sits. So there's more weight on those components. Also, because of steering, being able to turn the front wheels, there's more parts there to wear out. Typically what we see is tie rod ends worn out or broken, ball joints, control arms, shocks and struts on the front of vehicles.
Fort Macleod is a historic Alberta city. It has attracted the eyes of Hollywood filmmakers in the past, and once again will be filming a major motion picture. Ainsley O'Reilly has more.
This Sunday, if you're from Southern Alberta and want to be in a major motion picture, you have a chance to apply. Kevin Costner's film Let Him Go is looking for background actors.
It's a great opportunity for us to showcase the town, to celebrate our successes, of which we've had a lot of, and to get our people involved as extras in the filming of the movie.
Fort Macleod might be small, but Hollywood keeps coming back.
We're kind of a filming mecca for a little town. We had some filming here for Brokeback Mountain. We had Interstellar, I think it was. Fargo was filmed here. So one of the beauties of having a historic town is there's not a lot of art and set decor that needs to happen when you've already got historic buildings already on your main streets.
The town's mayor has lived there his whole life, and the process of filming brings feelings of nostalgia.
The Greer block is amazing. The old CIBC, I remember going in there as a child, just doing the banking and so on. And so that's always been neat. Queen's Hotel is an amazing looking building, and that's all on Main Street as well. And the Reaches block, the Empress Theater. So you got them all, and it's a pretty neat little Main Street.
Kevin Costner's thriller Let Him Go isn't the first time a major Hollywood film has come to Fort Macleod, and it certainly won't be the last. In fact, city officials tell me that a film crew from Holland is coming in the spring and into the summer for the filming of the Ultimate Forces Challenge. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
Federal Finance Minister Bill Morneau has announced his federal budget. In it, he talked about how Canadians who have to consider a new career can get the help they need.
The Canada Training Benefit will allow people to have more time, have the ability in that more time to continue to provide for their family and also to pay for training courses. So 4 more weeks every 4 years with up to $1,000 of credit, tax credit for training courses and the ability to use our employment insurance system to provide for their families.
It seems that neither Conservative leader Andrew Scheer nor NDP leader Jagmeet Singh were impressed with Morneau's new budget. Scheer says the extra money being spent is really just a cover-up for the SNC-Lavalin affair.
Justin Trudeau is covering up his SNC-Lavalin corruption scandal under $41 billion of brand new spending, with plans to raise taxes to pay for it if he's reelected. This is the most expensive cover-up in the history of cover-ups.
This budget, again, is one that the Liberal government had their last chance to show Canadians that are actually on their side. And again, they've just given crumbs to Canadians and they've given the entire pie to the wealthiest. This budget does not address the problems that people are facing. And again, it shows that this Liberal government and Mr. Trudeau are so out of touch of what people really need.
You can also include one of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly, as someone who is not really that impressed with Morneau's new budget, especially with our country's deficit continuing to climb.
Investing in the middle class. That's the title of the budget. And it's all about a little bit of help for seniors, a little bit of help for first-time home buyers, especially the millennials. It's a little bit, as you said, for skills training, but not a lot for anybody, which makes me wonder, why do we still have a $19.8 billion deficit for this year?
Catch my full interview with Brian as we discuss the budget and why so many ministers have left the Trudeau cabinet. That's coming up after Business News. In other news from the Hill, Liberal MP Selina Cesar-Chavanas has informed Prime Minister Justin Trudeau that she is leaving the Liberal caucus and will sit as an independent. The Whitby, Ontario MP has been a vocal supporter of Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott, 2 cabinet ministers who resigned over the SNC-Lavalin affair. She also accused Trudeau of yelling at her earlier this month when she announced she would not be seeking re-election this fall. The federal election is coming up this fall, and before that, we have the Alberta election on April 16th. Now, did you know that thanks to new rules, churches can now become political? John Pello is the CEO of the Canadian Council of Christian Charities, and he has the details.
When the election comes up, in the election period, churches and Christian ministries are free to talk as much as they want about issues that are in the political world. They just need to be tied to their charitable purpose. So, for instance, a church pastor would be able to preach as often as they want. If, say, abortion were an election issue, they would be able to preach as much as they want on the topic of life and abortion. They just couldn't say, and so vote for.
Reverend John Pello will have more on mixing politics with religion coming up in the second half of our show. U.S. Vice President Mike Pence surveyed the flooded areas in Nebraska. He viewed the raging Elkhorn River, talked to first responders, and visited a shelter for displaced people. He promised presidential disaster declarations.
President Trump asked me to be here in Nebraska and here in the region today with a very simple message. To all the families that have seen their homes flooded, seen livestock lost, who have had their lives, their communities upset by these extraordinary floods and severe weather. Our message is this: we're with you, and the American people are going to stand with people across Nebraska, across Iowa, across all of the 8 states that have been impacted by this severe weather and this flooding.
The first funerals for some of the 50 victims of last week's shootings at 2 mosques in New Zealand have begun. Christchurch authorities spent 4 days constructing a special grave at a city cemetery that is designated for the Muslim burials. A father and son who fled the civil war in Syria were buried before hundreds of mourners earlier today. Authorities spent 4 days building a special grave at a city cemetery that is designated for Muslim burials. An Australian white supremacist killed 50 worshippers in 2 mosques last Friday. Fulani jihadists have killed over 120 Christians over the past 3 weeks in central Nigeria. The terrorists used machetes and gunfire to slaughter men, women, and children. They burned down over 140 houses, destroyed property, and spread terror. A local philanthropist who is originally from Nigeria describes the mainstream media's response to the massacring of Nigerian Christians as silence in comparison to its approach towards last Friday's mass murder of Muslims in Christchurch, New Zealand.
It is pathetic. It must be condemned. Any killings at all of anybody should be condemned. And this particular case, the killings are regrettable and should stop. The recurrence of it makes it more disturbing, and we believe that the government should do more to protect the communities, especially the vulnerable ones that are being attacked, that are suffering, and do more to solve the underlying socioeconomic problems so that people can live side by side, Christians, Muslims, as it used to be.
Islamic terrorists also killed 60 people in northern Nigeria last month. According to Amnesty International, Boko Haram ransacked the town of Ran, leaving most of it in ruins. Christian leaders are calling for urgent prayers for peace in a very troubled region.
One of the worst attacks in northern Nigeria carried out by a radical Islamist has claimed at least 60 lives. According to Amnesty International, the attackers drove motorcycles through the border town of Ran, slaughtering people and setting homes on fire. Ben Kwashi is the Anglican Archbishop of Jos.
The attack on Ran is particularly worrisome because the town of Ran has been attacked quite a number of times, and the inability of the Nigerian armed forces to secure the town of Ran is sending an unfortunate signal to the civilian populace, because the attacks on the military formations continues to increase the fears of the civilians, and that one of Ran just sent people packing, and quite a number of people have moved into Maiduguri town itself, the capital city.
London-based pastor and filmmaker Fred Williams, who's originally from Jos, believes Christians in this troubled region need to respond with Christ's compassion to these ongoing attacks.
I think it's very important that we don't allow the convictions and the hatred to swallow up the love, the kindness, and the brotherly compassion we can show in this situation. So yes, the killings have continued, but the Christians need to rise up and begin to be the voice of Christ, begin to show love to not just each other, but also to the enemies, and continue to stand for peace.
Praying for peace in that region. A koala bear took the opportunity to cool off in an air-conditioned car near Adelaide, Australia. The little guy was relaxing on the leather seats as the owner tried to convince it to leave.
Hey, buddy. Do you want to go out the other side now? Oh, you're gorgeous. It's okay, I'm not trying to hurt you. Don't bite me. Come on, let's hop out the car. Can you go the other way? Go that way. No, not up the front. Can you please? Come on, hop out the car. I know it's nice and cool in here with the aircon. No, don't go up the front. Oh, man.
Just goes to show that koalas really like to be in the driver's seat. Beautiful day for driving today. Lots of sunshine for the first official day of spring, and the warm weather will be sticking around. I'll have a complete look at the weather picture in just a moment. Nice and warm again today for the first official day of spring. Tonight, mainly clear with a low near 2 degrees. Sunny and warm again tomorrow with a high expected near 15. Slightly cooler on Friday with a high near 11. A low pressure system returns on Saturday, bringing clouds and rain and a high of only 6. A chance of rain mixed with snow on Sunday and a high near +1. It'll be warming up again on Monday, expect a high near 10. Tuesday mainly sunny and a high of 12. Checking the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 7 and an average low of -6. The highest temperature of this date was recorded in 1960 at 21 degrees, and the record low was -30 in 2002. Sunrise was at 7:35, sunset at 7:43. Let's have a look at how tomorrow's shaping up across the country. Vancouver will be mainly sunny and 15, just a few clouds in Victoria and 15 as well. Sunny and 16 for Calgary, mainly sunny and 9 degrees for Edmonton on Thursday. Sunny and 9 as well for Regina. Only slightly cooler in Saskatoon with a high expected near 7. Winnipeg will be sunny and 4. Toronto will have periods of rain and 7 degrees. Expect rain mixed with snow in Ottawa and a high near 7 as well tomorrow. Showers and 6s on tap for Montreal. A mixture of sun and cloud for Fredericton, New Brunswick and a high of 8. Halifax, Nova Scotia will be mainly sunny and 5. Charlottetown, PEI will be partly cloudy and 5. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, just a few clouds and 5 degrees as well. Ottawa is promising billions of dollars to compensate dairy, egg, and poultry farmers who were hit hard by recent free trade agreements. The $3.65 billion will include just over $2 billion for farmers who lose income because of deals with European and Pacific Rim nations. That is in addition to a $250 million 5-year fund established in 2016 to compensate dairy farmers for the European Union deal. The budget also set aside $1.5 billion for farmers who lose money when they sell their production rights in the supply management system. Stats Canada shows numbers are increasing in beef trade last year between Canada and the European Union. Last year, Canada exported 1,059 metric tons of beef to the EU, valued at $15.5 million. That is a 113% increase in volume and a 98% increase in value compared to 2017. At the same time, European beef exports to Canada were up 12%. The Canadian Cattlemen's Association says the growth is due to more producers supplying more EU-eligible cattle and a major packer developer at the European market. The association says nearly 2/3 of the 2018 volume and half of that went to the UK. The union representing many of Canada's auto workers says it is suspending a campaign against General Motors. Unifor representatives say the biggest reason is because they're having positive talks with the automaker about preserving jobs in Oshawa, Ontario. The union says even though GM will no longer be manufacturing vehicles in Oshawa, there's potential to transform operations to maintain some employment. The announcement from GM last November that it would end production at the Oshawa plant at the end of this year would affect 2,600 jobs. With the close of Disney's $71 billion acquisition of Fox Entertainment, one analyst believes Disney now has the fuel to take on Netflix once it begins its new streaming service next year.
In the closing of the Disney-Fox acquisition, it really closes a major chapter for Iger and Disney. I mean, they really needed the Fox assets to make sure that as a streaming franchise, Disney was going to be a legit player. And this is really what I view as the first step in Disney's, potential encroachment on Netflix and others in the streaming world. Yeah, I mean, what they acquired, if you look at 21st Century Fox combined with Disney, now you're talking about, call it 35–40% of all box office content. Now, what they did do, they need to spin off the regional sports networks and sell those separately. And that's something where, from a DOJ perspective, Disney definitely needed to play nice in the sandbox. There would definitely be some job losses. I think a big focus from a price tag of $71 billion was the synergies that they saw in this acquisition. I think there will be some significant cost cuts in some of the non-content areas, and that's really how Disney justified this acquisition in terms of content and cost synergies. Disney needed Fox for the content. That's the fuel and the engine for the streaming service. Ultimately, Disney would be a fourth or fifth player without the Fox assets. This really gave them the content they needed to go up against the likes of Netflix and actually start to gain significant share. Without the Fox acquisition, they would be in the outside looking in.
Now, here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, UCP leader Jason Kenney was in Lethbridge today, saying that if he becomes premier on April 16th, his first order of business will be to repeal the carbon tax. Kenney and his local UCP candidates will also be at a public rally tonight, 6 o'clock at the Italian-Canadian Club. Alberta Premier Rachel Notley is also on her way to our city to drum up support for her candidates and the governing NDP. The federal budget came out and it contains a lot of pre-election goodies for Canadians, but some are not impressed by the new budget, including our very own Brian Lilly. Hear what political journalist Mr. Lilly has to say next. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Redemption Prison Ministry is holding a fundraising dinner Thursday, March 21st at Trinity Reformed Church in Lethbridge, with doors opening at 6 p.m. Come for a delicious dinner and discover what God is doing in the prisons through this amazing ministry. Please RSVP by Monday, March 18th by calling Chris at 403-317-3950 or email chrisv@trinityurc.ca. Stockfest 2019 is a benefit event supporting the Lethbridge Football Club and Kids Sport on Saturday, March 23rd at the Service Sports Center. Enjoy live music by the Bamboo Guppies, silent and live auctions, a 50-50 draw, and much more. Tickets are $20 in advance or $25 at the door. Purchase yours today by calling the Lethbridge Soccer Association at 403-320-5425. Blankets for Canada Lethbridge meets Thursdays from 10 a.m. to noon at Southminster United Church. Share your knitting and crocheting skills to keep those who are in need in our community warm. Donations of yarn and financial gifts are greatly appreciated and can be dropped off at the church. For more information, visit blanketsforcanada.ca or call 403-329-6586. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
The federal budget came out recently, setting the stage for the fall election. Many feel it'll provide a lot of distraction from the SNC-Lavalin affair. Joining me now from Ottawa is political journalist Brian Lilly. Now, Brian, many Canadians are actually excited about this budget since it'll include help for first-time home buyers, seniors, and Canadians who want to return to school for skills training.
Well, do you remember in the 2015 election, and well, basically every day since, Justin Trudeau and his cabinet have stood up and said that they're there for the middle class and those working hard to join it. Well, I was in the budget lockup, Hal. I was there for, it's got to be about my 18th budget. Investing in the middle class, that's the title of the budget. And it's all about a little bit of help for seniors, a little bit of help for first-time home buyers, especially the millennials. It's a little bit, as you said, for skills training, but not a lot for anybody, which makes me wonder, why do we still have a $19.8 billion deficit for this year? Because they talk about a national pharmacare plan, but they don't provide any money. They talk about covering prescription drugs for rare diseases that are, incredibly expensive. It can be $10,000 and up per year for some of these diseases. But that money doesn't kick in until 2022-23 fiscal year. So what are we spending all this money on that, despite the fact that government revenue has gone up, government spending keeps going up even faster? And this was the year that they were supposed to balance the budget. Instead, it's a $19.8 billion deficit. That's really tough. If you're a first-time home buyer, yeah, there's going to be some measures in there. And, I know your kids are in that range where you're probably hoping that they'll get out of the family home, buy a first home. There's lots of parents like that. But it's this weird thing where Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation is going to help you lower your monthly payments by taking an ownership stake in your house. It's absolutely bizarre.
That is strange, too, considering we had the stress test implemented not too long ago, right? Making it even harder for people to get mortgages. Brian, the Justice Committee met behind closed doors after a few hours. Liberal MPs want to end the SNC-Lavalin probe, but opposition MPs, including outspoken Tory MP Pierre Poilievre, are calling for Jody Wilson-Raybould to reappear.
Yeah, and the Liberals are having none of that. They don't want to hear another single witness on the SNC-Lavalin scandal, the one that is all about, do we have two-tier justice in Canada? Folks keep saying, well, it's too difficult for people to understand. No, the polls show Canadians understand. And by a 2-to-1 margin, if not more, depending on which poll you look at, Canadians believe the former Attorney General over Justin Trudeau. And her allegation is that Justin Trudeau and members of his staff put inappropriate pressure on her in her role as the Attorney General to try and get her to basically throw a court proceeding. They wanted her to end the criminal prosecution of a well-connected Montreal firm to help them get off bribery and corruption charges. Canadians get that. They understand. The average person has greater abilities than I think a lot of pundits give them credit. So the Liberals said, no, we've heard enough witnesses. We don't need to hear any more. Doesn't matter that most of the key players in this have not been heard from twice. They say, no, we're done. We are done. And what they want to study is online hate and the rise of right-wing extremism and white supremacy. They are effectively using the shooting at the mosque in Christchurch, New Zealand to cover up. And I find that deplorable. I'm not saying that that's not an appropriate topic for the Justice Committee, of all places, to try and study. But to use that as an excuse to stop an investigation into corruption in your own government is despicable.
Our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau recently named a former Liberal Justice Minister a special advisor on the SNC-Lavalin affair. Brian, it was met by quite a few jeers and laughter during question period.
Yeah, well, Monday they were laughing, Tuesday they were walking out, which was Andrew Scheer's reaction to the budget. He said, this budget's illegitimate, we're walking out because you won't talk about SNC-Lavalin. Well, the way that Justin Trudeau wants to talk about SNC-Lavalin is to have Anne McClellan, who was Justice Minister and Attorney General under Jean Chrétien in the late 90s and the early 2000s, to come in and investigate what the role of the Attorney General and the Justice Minister should be. Should they be split? And to provide a report. And he's saying that she's going to provide an unbiased view. Look, I have great respect for Anne McClellan. She is a woman that has devoted her life to public service. She is a capable woman. She's a very smart woman, but she's also a very partisan Liberal. Until they made this announcement, and actually until after they had made the announcement and it was pointed out to the government, she was scheduled to be the headliner at a Liberal fundraiser, a very well-heeled Liberal fundraiser to try and get more women in politics at the end of this month. So, she's out there stumping for the Liberals. She has made comments on this very case in a public manner, and you're going to ask someone that's fundraising for the party to investigate the party? It is laughable. And that's why both the Conservatives and the NDP are mocking it. There's no other reaction to it, but it shouldn't be allowed to stand.
Brian, a story we recently aired on BCN was that Privy Council Clerk Michael Wernick stepped down. Okay, let's add this up now. Jody Wilson-Raybould left, Jane Philpott, Scott Bryson, Gerald Butts, and now Mr. Wernick. Our Prime Minister has done his third cabinet shuffle in just 3 months.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Let's consider this for a moment. Consider the fact that the Justice Committee says there's nothing left to see. Well, the Liberals on the Justice Committee say there's nothing left to see. It was just over a week ago the Prime Minister was saying, or almost 2 weeks ago, the Prime Minister was saying, let the Justice Committee do their work. They're investigating. Let them keep investigating. They say there's nothing left to see. And yet, the former Attorney General and the turned Veterans Affairs Minister resigned from Cabinet. Then Jerry Butts, the Prime Minister's principal advisor, principal secretary, and best buddy since university, resigned. Then Jane Philpott resigned. Then Michael Wernick resigned. But why did any of them resign? Apparently because nobody did anything wrong and there's nothing to see here. You don't get four powerful people resigning from powerful and influential positions over nothing. There is something there. This is not the nothing burger that the Liberals want to see. And Michael Wernick, by the way, part of his reasoning, he's right on this, was he said, part of his role as clerk of the Privy Council was to oversee the next election and look out for foreign interference and matters of that. The Conservatives in the NDP said they didn't trust him to oversee the next election because he came across so partisan in his committee appearances. They also basically said they wouldn't trust him if they formed government, and he acknowledged that that was not possible. So he'll step down before the next election. A guy named Ian Shugart, who's another lifelong bureaucrat, will take over, and hopefully he can just do the job that clerks are called to do and not be a cheerleader for the party in power. And I feel that way about whoever's in power, Hal. The clerk of the Privy Council should not be their cheerleader.
The SNC-Lavalin affair will be on the top of many Canadians' minds as we head to the fall election, but so will the Norman trial. Brian, give our viewers a bit of history on this case and how the Department of National Defence has declined to pay for legal fees for Vice Admiral Mark Norman, but will pay lawyers for those testifying for the Crown.
Yeah, Mark Norman is a man that, also dedicated his life to public service, but through the military, rose to be the second in command for the Canadian forces. So there's the chief of the defense staff. He was right below that, top naval officer in the country, accused of leaking cabinet secrets. I just want to point out, over the last week, Hal, basically the entire budget, this document that we were talking about off the top, basically all the major aspects of the budget that the government wanted to highlight were leaked out to the media. So why is Mark Norman on trial in a town where everything gets leaked and where the government orchestrated many of the leaks on this very budget, a very sensitive document? It used to be you didn't find out a thing about the budget. Now they leaked the whole thing, but Mark Norman's on trial. It seems unfair. It also does seem unfair that he has to crowdfund for his legal defense. But as you say, the Navy, the military will pay for those who are going to be Crown witnesses and who may feel they need their own legal counsel as they go in to testify.
Now, we've talked a lot about Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Tory leader Andrew Scheer, but NDP leader Jagmeet Singh finally made his debut in the House of Commons. Brian, how well did he do?
He's doing better than I think people would have given him credit for a couple of weeks ago. His party, it's interesting to watch both the Conservatives and the NDP working hand in glove in some areas of this fight, push back against the Liberals trying to shut down the investigation of SNC-Lavalin, but he's also carving out his own area. He decided that his MPs would not walk out in solidarity with the Conservatives, which the Conservatives did after yelling down the finance minister's budget speech on Tuesday. So he does have experience. He was a well-regarded member of the Ontario legislature, but I can tell you, as someone that's just moved down to Queen's Park, it's a very different setup at Queen's Park than it is on Parliament Hill. Even the way they ask questions is different. So Singh's going to take a little while to find his sea legs, to go back to the Admiral Norman Navy side of things, but I think he's surprising people in how he's doing, and this is only going to raise his profile and perhaps raise the fortunes of the NDP, which have been sagging without a full-time leader in the House of Commons.
Which will therefore be a benefit to the Conservatives heading into the fall election, split that left vote. Maybe the Tories will go right up the middle.
Absolutely.
Canada announced recently that it's extending military missions in both Ukraine and Iraq, but there will be no change to the size and composition of the 200 soldiers in the Canadian contingent. Let's talk a bit about that.
We have been part of the Ukraine mission since about 2014. And this is something that is, in Iraq about the same length of time. Both of these started under the Harper Conservatives. The idea with Ukraine, it's a training mission. It's basically because they're not a member of NATO, unlike Poland, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, all these countries that also border with Russia, they feel a bit more vulnerable. If Russia were to invade Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, where we also have troops, then we would be obliged, because they're NATO members, to go in and help defend them. We don't have that same thing with Ukraine, and so what we've been doing there is trying to just do a show of support, to help with training, to show that they're not alone, that they've got support from the West, because after the annex of Crimea, there was a lot of concern that there would be more. And of course, Russia fighting in eastern Ukraine, but not calling themselves Russian soldiers. In Iraq, yes, we're still a small part of the pushback against ISIS. Of course, we got out of the bombing campaign shortly after the 2015 election, but still remain a part of that. And I don't hear any complaints from Canadians that we're part of either mission.
Brian, let's chat a bit about social media here. Facebook is introducing measures to prevent election disruption.
And I'm not sure how much I trust Facebook on these sorts of things, because in the past, they have teamed up with organizations like Snopes.com, which maybe you remember. Snopes is the place you go to verify that email that your great aunt sent you about don't sit down on chairs in movie theaters, or you'll get pricked by a needle, and then you'll get a horrible disease and die. And Snopes would tell you it's not true. When Snopes became political, they showed that they were consistently on one side, and that was on the side of the left. And so a lot of conservatives just feel like the organization's way too liberal. They've been one of Facebook's fact checkers before. And so a lot of conservatives are wary about Facebook getting involved in what material you can and can't see, what material will be visible to the public, what won't be, because they don't have a great track record. There have been leaks of memos from Facebook itself talking about suppressing conservative content. So I think we have to be wary about this, especially given some of the close ties between the Trudeau government and, Facebook itself, from locals that had gone to work for Facebook after working for the Liberals to Justin Trudeau's relationship with some of the executives at the top of the organization.
BCN contributor Brian Lilly joining me from Ottawa once again. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thank you.
Faith organizations in Canada have long enjoyed charitable tax status, largely because our governments have recognized the public benefit associated with promoting religion and its principles. But a special Senate committee has been studying how to modernize Canadian charity law. Some groups are concerned changes could be on the horizon that might adversely affect religious charities. Joining me now via Skype from Waterloo, Ontario is Reverend John Pello, CEO of CCCC, the Canadian Council of Christian Charities. John, welcome to Bridge City News.
Well, thank you very much, Hal. Glad to have this opportunity to talk with you.
Now, John, you made a presentation to the Special Senate Committee on the charitable sector recently, asking them to affirm advancing religion as a charitable purpose with significant public benefit to Canadian society. Why did you decide to make this presentation?
Well, there were two things going on. The first is that there have been a lot of calls for advancing religion to be eliminated in Canada as a charitable purpose. So we have the Abortion Rights Coalition of Canada, we have the BC Humanist Association, and lots of others. Lawyer activists, legal activists have been calling for this for some time. And we just thought, you know what, it's timely that we go on record demonstrating that we don't have to apologize saying it's just interior spiritual benefits, but we actually benefit the entire society of Canada. The most atheistic person in Canada benefits because of religion. But the second reason was that the BC Humanist Association did make a specific recommendation to this committee that they should consider recommending taking away charitable status for religious charities. And that's the two reasons. Those are the ones that we were responding to. And we felt it was important to get it on the record, the wealth of academic level research around the world that proves beyond a shadow of a doubt the many, many, many benefits of advancing religion.
So, John, bottom line is, let me ask you, how well was this received?
It seems to have been received very well. The committee, apparently their heads were nodding as I was speaking. They were intrigued by the report that was submitted, the written report that is available to the public. And they asked me to come in to speak more about it. So I think that was a very positive step. The surprise was they really had no questions, which left me feeling, were they engaged? However, knowledgeable people have said that yes, the fact that there were no questions means there's nothing I said that they want to challenge, and that the topic itself to them is apparently not controversial. So those are very good signs for us.
That is very good news, absolutely. Now, we've seen some court rulings, such as the TWU Law School case, where religious rights seem to fall to the bottom of the pile. There was a question and answer time afterward with senators. Was there a tone aimed at maybe discrediting religion as having a public benefit at all?
No, there was no hint of that. They asked some questions about rural charities such as churches and where they get help from, things like that, but not related to the topic. And it was actually a very respectful, a very good hearing.
Now, there are about 32,000 religious charities in Canada, which makes up about 40% of all charities in Canada. If charitable tax status is removed, how would this really impact all faiths, religions across the country?
Well, the impact, I think, would surprise some people. People give to their churches not for the tax benefit, but because they want to give to their churches. So the churches may be impacted to a degree, but religious people give much more to secular charities than secular people do. And if we don't have as much money left over because we paid more tax, we're going to support our religious charities. We're not going to support the secular charities likely as much. It's the secular charities actually that are the most concerned, from what I hear and what they tell me. They are the ones that are most concerned about religion losing its charitable status, because they know that their big donors are people who attend a place of worship regularly. So and then the other thing, we've done a study that has looked at churches and it's looked at the public, the economic benefit, social economic benefit, and they put a dollar value to it. The study has been replicated in various places, but the nutshell is for every dollar that a charity spends, it puts $4.50 of value into its community. And when you compare that value to the lost tax revenue, through the income tax support, through sales tax they don't collect, and municipal property taxes, guess what? Canadian taxpayers get a 12 times return on investment for every dollar of tax that is lost or not collected because of a religious charity. So for them, if it can put money into the federal coffers, that say religious donors are going to pay more tax, but at the same time, if they want the same benefits to the secular society, it's a $12 for every dollar they take in, they're going to have to spend $12 more.
But John, if the government was to remove the tax-exempt status of religious organizations, would it mean billions more of tax revenue for a debt-ridden government?
Yes, it would. So if you're looking only in the short term, there would be extra dollars coming into the coffers. But if you're looking long term at the social economic benefits that are provided to the community, whether you're religious or not, that is in jeopardy. And that's why we went to this committee, because that message, nobody knows that message. The researchers know it, but it hasn't had broad public play. So we want to get it on the record in an official government document that advancing religion provides tremendous public benefits, whether you are religious or not. That's our key message.
Let me ask you, is there also a need to close some loopholes to prevent certain groups from getting charitable tax status?
I don't know if I would call them loopholes. That sounds nefarious, but there are organizations. We're not allowed to do things that are against the law. Okay, so we do have hate laws, and so, but we already have protection for those in place. We don't need to. For instance, the government introduced a values test with the Canada Summer Jobs issue, and there are people who are saying that a values test should also be applied to charities. And what they're trying to do is to weed out those who have unpopular views. There's a difference between unpopular view and hate speech. And once you go as a society saying we're going to use a values test, then the question is whose values? So right now we have a government of one stripe in place, and they may like a values test, However, should they be defeated and another government of a different ideology come in, now we're going by their values. This is not a good place to be.
Yeah, we talked to a lot of Christian groups. We talked to a lot of Christian groups, John, that had a problem with that attestation in regards to the summer jobs grant program. Do you agree with abortion, a woman's right to choose? I mean, you know, or you're not going to receive funding for your landscaping business. So a lot of business owners, Christian and even not Christian, had a problem with that.
Oh, absolutely. And the whole thing was premised on something that is actually faulty, because we don't have a right to abortion. We have that's a whole other topic, and it'll take us off. But there are people who believe we do, and they happen to be in power.
So how does the CRA go about determining who does or does not qualify as a religious charitable organization?
Well, there are tests that they have to do. So there has to be, you know, they get all kinds of, I would call them really wacky applications. So they're looking for, is there a God or a higher power or something? Is there a sort of a coherent doctrine to it? So we have the Bible and there's the Quran and so on. So they're looking for, are there evidence? Is it a communal thing? Does it bring a community together? CRA pays a lot of attention to legal precedents. That's how they have to decide. Everything goes back to court cases and what judges have said. So it is it's not always easy. Seems to be working okay so far.
So how does the CRA define what exactly provides a public benefit? I mean, you talked about a sense of community coming together. What else?
Yes. Okay. What they're looking at is that it's not what's called a private benefit. So if you have a charity set up to support a particular family, that's not public, that's a private benefit. So they're looking at, do you actually engage with the public? Are people welcome to take part? Do you serve a broad enough segment? Now, you might say, we exist for to have a shelter for abused women, for example. So it's a limited population, but you haven't restricted it to this person or that person. So that's public. There was a famous case of a group of nuns in the UK who just got together and their entire life was just praying for the country. That was not deemed to be a public benefit. They didn't actually, they didn't engage with anybody. They were just in there all by themselves praying, and that was the support, the total of it. So it needs to benefit a significantly large part of the population, that it is not a personal benefit to someone else.
But when two or more gather in his name and they pray, there's a huge benefit there, you bet.
Oh, the spiritual side, we would say, oh, absolutely, that's a very powerful form of prayer. The government doesn't accept that.
No, right. Now, some may ask, how do religious activities benefit non-religious people, John?
Oh, in many ways. For instance, anytime a secular person goes to a secular charity, most of the support they're receiving came from religious people who learned how to be generous and gracious in their places of worship. When the community programming, there was a study done here in Ontario of 46 churches, and they discovered that the non-religious people in the community were 4.5 times more likely to use their outreach programs than the church members were themselves. When we think about, if you go to the very abstract level, that just the fact that there is religion, that the freedom of religion is what's called a prototypical right. So the freedom of the press, the freedom of assembly, the freedom of speech, all of those freedoms come out of the freedom of religion. And so they benefit from that. And freedom of religion, former Chief Justice Dixon of the Supreme Court of Canada said it's prototypical, and it's essential to to a liberal democracy that you have this there. Now, other ways that they benefit is that it's been documented many, many times that people who attend a place of worship once a week or more are less depressive, they are less sick, they're drawing on fewer resources, they are more productive in society, higher educational, there's all these things that a secular person still benefits because the quality of the neighborhood is more vibrant, it's better. So they actually benefit in like really many different ways.
So which types of religious groups are potentially at risk of losing their charitable status? Your thoughts?
Well, we'd have to see what comes forward. I know that there's a push that if you don't agree on issues of sexuality and gender, abortion, for example, there is a very strong push to take the charitable status away. They'll say, okay, you can have your beliefs, but we don't have to support you. So that's probably the most realistic scenario, rather than pulling it away from everybody. It would be more on, are you in line with so-called Canadian values? The ones that would be probably hurt the most if they took religion away would be evangelism ministries. Compassion ministries qualify under other heads. Local churches are going to see some fall off, but people will support their local church. But the pure evangelism ministries, they're the ones that really struggle in other parts of the world where advancing religion is not charitable.
John, we've got the fall election coming up here in Canada. Where are we at now when it comes to faith-based organizations potentially getting involved in politics?
Wow, things have changed just recently, Al, with a court ruling that took place. We still cannot be partisans. We can't say vote for this party or candidate or that one. So we can't be partisan. But there used to be a cap of about 10% that what we charity could put towards political activity. So we can that's been taken away. So when the election comes up, in the election period, churches and Christian ministries are free to talk as much as they want about issues that are in the political world. They just need to be tied to their charitable purpose. So for instance, a church pastor would be able to preach as often as they want. If, say, abortion were an election issue, they would be able to preach as much as they want on the topic of life and abortion. They just couldn't say, and so vote for. That's still not changed. But this has really opened the door, and that's why, for example, the Abortion Rights Coalition of Canada, just a few weeks ago, has come out and said that we should take away the status, because now all these churches can go out and proclaim as much as they want. They're using that court ruling against us, wanting to shut us down.
Now, with the track record of our current Liberal government, is it possible that maybe pro-life organizations will be losing their charitable tax status?
The current government does not seem to recognize the difference between, say, a Right to Life group, which is political advocacy, and they're the ones with the placards and so forth. They don't seem to recognize the difference between that and a crisis pregnancy center. I think that is, the one is not charitable, and the pregnancy centers are charitable. And I think there's this confusion out there as to what exactly is a pregnancy center. I think they're under a lot of fire for things that they actually don't do. So they would be seriously at risk. I think if there's a second mandate, I can't get too political myself, but if there were a second mandate, given the trajectory that we're on, that would not be a surprising development.
Reverend John Pello, CEO of CCCC, the Canadian Council of Christian Charities, thanks a lot for joining me today from Waterloo, Ontario.
You're very welcome. Thank you. God bless.
You too. On behalf of all of us here at PCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.